Hey guys, happy Wednesday. You know what time it is. It's time to do this Live Boldly quilt. This is the next video in the series of one quilt from start to finish. Round 2, we're working on the Live Boldly quilt. I was just thinking today that I really want to try to make something other than a quilt. I have made a couple of bags, but they're more like, I don't know, sacks, I guess. I really want to make something different. So I'm kind of noodling that. Just thought I'd put it out there. If you guys have any suggestions, I was thinking, I don't know, maybe an apron or something. I don't know. I'll put it out there. What you guys suggest, maybe I'll put it on a list and we'll go through all those things and see if we can make them together. So as you know, we're working on Live Boldly today. And I have to tell you that the more that I look at these, the more I just fall in love with them. Like, look at this one. Look at that contrast. How pretty is that, right? Look at this one, the blue and the purple together. And like, I'm looking at these blocks and I know what the quilt looks like. I know what the finished product is gonna look like, but they're so big that I can't imagine them up there. However, we're gonna do that. So see, my wrinkly design wall is up. So we're gonna put some blocks up there. We're also gonna talk a little bit. I know I haven't addressed the issue of trimming the half square triangle. See, still has the dog ears on it. So there they are. So how to trim this with a specialty ruler and just regular. So we're gonna do both of those. I'm gonna put my sunglasses away. Just got in from outside where it's sunny and 70. Just great. I love it. I'm so glad that the cold weather is leaving us because that's enough of that, frankly. So I am going to get all this set up and organized. I'm going to see if I can do something about that wrinkle in that design wall. We're going to turn the camera around, and first we're going to talk about how to trim those. And then we're going to start putting this bad boy together. I'm super excited about that. So give me a second. Let me turn the camera and we'll be right back. Hi guys. Okay, so we are ready to trim some half square triangles. Look at these beauties. How pretty is that, right? So we're going to trim these up and I'm going to show you a few different ways to do that. I've got a couple different tools here at my disposal. I have this block is 12.5 inches. I have a 12.5 inch Creative Grids ruler. Remember that these rulers have this stuff on the back. Let me flip this around without whacking the camera. Here we go. So they've got this stuff and you can hear it. It's kind of textured so they don't slide around when you are working on your projects, right? So then I also have, because we don't always have the right size ruler for the project that we're working on, I have a ruler that's much bigger. This one's 16.5 inches. And so I'm going to show you how to trim with a ruler that's bigger than the block that you're trimming. I'm going to show you how to trim with a ruler that is exactly the size of the block that you're trimming. And then I'm also going to show you this guy. I know I've talked about this company before. This is Block Lock, and they make a bunch of different specialty trim tools. They make a half square triangle trim tool. They make a flying goose trim tool. They make a quarter square triangle trim tool. They make all types. We're going to use the half square triangle trimmer, and this one is the big boy. This is a 12.5 inch. These rules apply whether you're making Charisma Horton's large Live Boldly quilt like I am, or you're making the medium or the small. All the blocks are exactly half square triangles. Well, not all the blocks, but the blocks that you'll be trimming are half square triangles and 3/4 square triangles, and they trim the same way. In this case, we're going to do these half square triangles 3 ways, kind of like the restaurant. You know how they say broccoli 3 ways, or, you know, Wagyu beef 3 ways. So we're going to start with the ruler that's exactly the same size as the block. And like I said, this is kind of a weird angle. I'm kind of behind the camera. So bear with me as I line everything up. But this goes pretty basic, guys. All you have to do is, if your ruler is exactly the same size as your block, slide this out of the way, then what you're going to do, I'm going to move this up here a little bit, is you are going to find the center of that ruler. Look at this guy. So right here is a crosshair, and I don't know if you can see that for the glare, but there's like a crosshair right in the middle. So I'm going to drop that crosshair right smack dab in the middle of my block. I'm going to look at my corners and see how that lines up. And because of the camera angle and the position, I'm not going to actually, it's going to be kind of hard for me to do it. But what I do is I'll swipe off this side and this side. And then I'm going to pick up my ruler and I am going to turn my block 180 degrees. So it was facing left. It's going to face, oops, we got some little strings attached here. It's going to face right. We're going to do the same thing, line the middle up there, check the corners, make sure everybody, and I'm going to give this guy a swipe. Make sure everybody is where they should be. Let's see. Yep, looks good up there. I'm going to plant my hand. Remember, we talked about holding the ruler steady, so I'm going to hold my hand there, and then I'm going to swipe up this side, and I'm going to swipe down here like that. And of course, because I'm reaching, my pressure is not even, so this dog ear did not come off. So I'm just going to swipe it off this way. Don't mind the jiggly camera standing behind it. So that's how I would trim with just a regular ruler that is the size of the block that I'm making. And there you have that finished block. Move these little pieces out of the way. And there you go. That's your half square triangle trimmed with a ruler that's exactly the same size as the block. Now, I'm going to trim another one, but this time I'm going to use a ruler that is much, oops, sorry about that, guys. I'm going to use a ruler that's much, much bigger. This one's 16.5 inches big. It's a big, big, big honking one. And I'm going to put this down like so. And I'm going to find that 12.5 inch mark. Now, Creative Grids and most quilting rulers do this thing where they have a little corner mark. It looks like an L. It's just a right angle. And you can find the measurement of your block. And I'm going to have to slide her back up here because this ruler is so darn big. It's very handy when you make giant blocks, though. All right, so we're going to find that 12.5 inch mark. And it's about there. 12.5 inches all the way up. And I'm going to line it up like this. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to swipe off, and I'm kind of at a bad angle here, so I'm not going to actually cut. But I'm going to swipe off these two sides. And then I'm going to pick her up and flip her around 180 degrees and then do the same thing. Line it up on your 12.5 inch or whatever size block you are going to do, right? You're going to line it up here in this corner, and then you're going to swipe and swipe. And you will have a block that is squared to the size that you need. And then, last but not least, my favorite way to do it, because let's face it, I mean, gadgets are fun. I'm a big gadget person. Love them, love them, love them. Is you can see how much love this has gotten because it's so scuffed up and scratched up, but it's just a great tool. So here's my half square triangle. Now, the Block Lock logo goes to wherever the seam is not. So I have pressed my seam here to the purple so I can feel it underneath there. And when I put my ruler on top of it, you see how it stops at that seam? Now, I don't want to pull because I don't want to distort my triangles. Remember, we talked about distortion. Anything you cut on the bias, is super easy to get out of shape. But I'm going to line this up. I'm going to press down. And again, I'm not going to cut on video because I'm actually embracing the camera stand, so it's kind of difficult. But you're going to cut up one side, cut down the other, and then if you're lucky, you have a rotating mat, so all you have to do is go whoop and turn it around. But if you're like me and you don't, we're going to flip her around 180 degrees, And we're also going to turn our ruler around 180 degrees because that seam, the logo always has to go to where the seam is not. And then I line it up on my line and I cut and cut again. And that is all trimmed up. And then it will look just as pretty as this one. Dog ears will be gone. So 3 different ways to trim your half square triangles, no matter how big or small they are. You can always use a ruler that's exactly the size of the block you're trimming. You can use a ruler that's bigger, of course, and you can use a specialty tool. In this case, I am using a ruler by the company called Block Lock, and those are the rulers that I use to trim my half square triangles. So I'm going to flip the camera around, and we're going to start using the design wall and putting this beauty together. I'll be right back.
Okay, let's go.
Okay guys, so we've got all of our blocks trimmed up, and now we're going to talk about layout. How we lay it out, how we keep track of what we're doing, how I keep track of what I'm doing, and what a design wall is for. So design walls are great, and they come in many different sizes. They even have small ones that you can keep right on your sewing table so that you can put your blocks together row by row. A lot of times if I am not chain piecing, if I'm putting blocks together, like random blocks that I'm making, I have a hard time keeping track of where the pieces go, especially if you're doing like a folded corner or a flying goose. It's just kind of easy to keep track of that if you've got a tiny design wall by your sewing table and you just stick the pieces onto the wall. So they do stick really well. So for example, here's the first block in the first row of the Live Boldly quilt. And yep, I have it laid out just right. And so the fabric just sticks to this kind of flannelly thing, and you can peel it off and put it up higher if you want to. So I'm just going to lay out the first row, and then we'll talk a little bit. I'm going to bring this down just a hair because, and yes, it is shorts weather again. Yay! The landscapers are working on the field in the back, and we got our sprinklers turned on. It's great. I'm loving it. I'm happy to see the sunshine and have warm weather again. So we're going to lay it out, and then we're going to talk about how to keep track of what you're doing. So here is row 1. Just like that. And don't mind my back. Sorry. I'm going to just stick these up here like so. And I'm sure I'm not going in a straight line, but that's okay. It's just to get the general idea, right? Then this guy. And then this guy. And we might have to imagine the last one in the row. So let me move this over a little bit. I think they're okay if they hang off of the side just a hair. But if you squeeze them off of the flannel too much, they're not gonna stick as well. So just slide these over just a little bit. And then the last one is this guy right here. And we're gonna hope he stays up there. Come on, dude. Just stay. So that's my very first row. And as you can see, the blocks are pretty big. So it would be really easy to get them muddled up. Plus, there's a lot of like, you'll have the yellow with the green, and then you're going to have yellow with orange. So you want to make sure you keep them all in order. What I do is, I'm going to sneak past here really quick, is I use my Wonder Clips and a Sharpie marker, not near the fabric. And Wonder Clips have a little metal piece right there. And you can write on that with the Sharpie marker. If you write on the plastic, you won't be able to take it off. But if you write on the metal, you can take a Q-tip with some rubbing alcohol and rub it, and it will come right off. Easy peasy. So if you need letters, you can do A, B, C. I have so many Wonder Clips that I don't need anything fancy to keep track of my rows. Although there are fancy things, right? So there's these little things called alphabetties. They're super cute. They have letters on one side, numbers on the other. And you still need a wonder clip because you have to clip them to your fabric, but they're so cute. They also make pins with letters and numbers on them. I can't see very well without my glasses on, so those pins, for me, it's just a pain to have to keep putting my glasses. I write a number on here, so I take my Sharpie, and we're going to write number 1 on the Sharpie, just like that. See the number 1 on there. And I'm going to collect these in order. Very important to collect them in order. Because if you don't collect them in order, you're not going to sew them in order. So make sure that you keep them all in the right spot. And then I just throw a clip on them. And that my clip has the number on it. And so I have to organize these a little bit better so they're not wrinkled. And then that's row number 1. And so now I will continue to lay out row by row, and I'm going to continue to use wonder clips to clip them together. And then once all the rows are laid out and clipped and labeled, I can start sewing them together. So I am going to get some of these laid out. I'm going to make the camera move really fast, and then we'll see each other over at the sewing machine. Okay, so we're at the sewing table, and I have got all of my blocks in order, and I've got all of my rows labeled with my little wonder clips, and I wrote on each row what number. I had to actually change it because it's letters, so I just wrote with a Sharpie letters instead of numbers. I do have a couple of extra blocks, and I think I might try to figure out a way to piece them into the backing. So we'll see about that when we get there. I'm sometimes overly ambitious, not gonna lie. And then I look at it and I go, how do I do that? And then I kind of just put it aside. But we'll see. We'll see what happens with those. So as with anything, start from the top. And really what I think is most important, or what will be most important with this quilt as you sew along, is to be sure that your seams align and nest up in as often as you can do that. That is one advantage to pressing your seams open, is for some people it seems to be a little bit easier to line them up. I feel like you get it's easier to get accuracy with nested seams than pressing your seams open and lining them up that way. That's just my opinion. If you disagree, stick it in the comments. Let's talk about it. But for me, it's about the seams nesting. I think it makes it perfect. So I'm going to put these on because I can't see without them. And that's the Truefus. And I'm going to put these blocks together. Now, as you sew, for me, I've noticed that if I try to figure out how to nest the seams in a block that I'm making, then when I put the whole block together, a block with another block, then my seams don't match. So matching them to make the block, to piece the block together, may mean that they don't line up when you're putting your rows together. So like in this case, my top point here, both seams are pressed in the same direction. Nothing I can do about that now. So the only thing that I can do to make sure that I'm accurate at that end is to make sure that I sew really slowly. You guys, you're going to hear me say it a million times over. Going fast, it's not a race. Just like there's no quilting police, there is no checkered flag at the end of your quilt. It doesn't happen. I thought it did too when I first started quilting. I thought for sure you get a prize for finishing it the fastest. You don't. And chances are you create more trouble for yourself by going fast. So very slow. You'll hear me. You'll hear how I slow down here. And I'm going to just start really super slow at the top. You guys know I sew with leaders and enders, just little scraps of fabric that I put in to start my sewing machine. And then I am going to line up that, and I always start super, listen to how slow that is on the end. And it is because I know my sewing machine, and she will chew right through that corner, and it won't be a 1/4 inch seam, and it will just look terrible. So I go really, really slow at the end. For the rest of the block, I mean, you do you. You sew as quickly as you are comfortable sewing. You might get a little shimmy here because the camera is actually on the sewing table. So I apologize in advance for that. But I'm going to sew along and finish this block, and then I'll show you what it looks like when I'm done. This is the first 2 blocks of the first row of this quilt. Okay, so I'm just about at the end of these 2 blocks. I'm just going to go really slow here. And I hope you can hear how slow that goes. Like, I really want to impress upon you how important it is if you want those perfect points to go really slow at the beginning and the end. You can get, carried away with yourself in the middle, but beginning and end is super, super important just if you want to get those good points, right? And so I do want to give a shout out to our subscriber, Jennifer, who gave us the idea of when you are piecing your rows. So once your blocks are pieced together and you're putting your blocks, so your blocks are complete and you're putting them into rows. You press your even rows to the right, your odd rows to the left, and then no matter what, your seams will always nest. So, and that's always a fun thing, right? So these 2 blocks are together. It's kind of tricky because those points don't, the seams don't nest. So it's a little harder for me to get a perfect point. Like this one is a little bit off, you can see. And it looks kind of bigger on camera than in real life. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that imperfection. It doesn't, again, finished is better than perfect. So I'm okay with it. Look at this one. So these seams nested. When I sewed this together, those 2 seams nested. Look how nice that point is. These 2 seams were pressed to the same side, and I didn't really do anything special to try to keep them, lined up. I tried to go really slow, but that's what I got without them nesting. So that's how much of a difference it makes when your seams actually nest, in my opinion, to get them to line up. Getting points to line up when your seams don't nest, it's easier in the middle of a space than right at the end. At the end, it's just going to be really tricky. So I'm going to do my best to make sure that my points are as good as I can get them. But a long time ago, I stopped giving myself such a hard time when they didn't line up. So I'm doing this one next. So it's another of the same type of block. And on this one, my seams do nest. For some reason, they are pressed a little differently. I think I sewed them together differently. And I think we talked about that in the first video, that when I put these blocks together, these gray, the 2 shades of gray, black and white, you can either sew, let's see if I can turn this without making a mess. So you can either sew these 2 together and the other 2 together, or you can do black and white and the 2 grays together. And so I think I did it differently, and I sewed it together in stages. So sometimes I did one way, sometimes I did another. It doesn't really matter. But when I did the black and gray and white and gray, I'm able to nest my seams as they go together. So that's what I talked about earlier, about planning as you go to make your next step as easy as possible, right? So I'm going to continue to sew this row together. and I will sew all of the rows together. And then once we have them all together, we'll lay them out. And next week, we're going to talk a little bit about sewing the rows together, like putting those together. I do recommend, as you sew your rows at the machine, don't get rid of those clips with the number or the letter on them. Hang on to the clips because you never know how things might get out of order. And remember what I said about this particular quilt, it's super important to keep yourself organized. And that means keep track of which row is who. So I just took my clip and I clipped it onto the completed row. I have already completed one row of this quilt. And so I'm actually going from the bottom to the top. So this is the first row that I put together. And so this is the first row that I put together, the last row in the quilt. But because I have my Wonder Clips and because I used my Sharpie marker to mark them, I'm just putting this right back onto this completed row and I clip it right at the top, and I will always know that this is row H. So I'm going to finish these up. I will video that in time lapse so you guys can watch me muddle around. And then next week, we're going to put the top together and we'll be all done. We'll talk a little bit maybe about what I might use to back it and what I might use to bind it, but it's going to pretty much be a wrap-up video. Now, if you've followed along this far, if you have loved this video series as much as you love the shipwreck series, text or put in the comments below, I live boldly. Oops, sorry. I live boldly. If you put that in the comments, you'll be eligible for a drawing, and I will send you a throw size kit of the Live Boldly quilt, pattern included, so that you can make this beautiful quilt yourself at home with the same exact fabrics that I used. And I will put a link to the kit in the description just in case you want to get it ahead of time and don't want to take a chance on not winning it. But remember, put a comment in the comments and say, I live boldly, and you will be qualified for an entry into the Live Boldly quilt kit drawing. Thank you guys always for your support. I really appreciate you following along. Hi to everybody that stopped by the quilt show in the Tri-Cities area and said hello. A few of you came by and said, hey, I watch you on YouTube, and I am so grateful for that. I'm so grateful for your support. Keep watching, like and subscribe so that you know when I post new videos. We're going to be working on all kinds of stuff, not just quilts, but other things too. We may even learn a few techniques together, you and I. So let's see what happens. Thank you again for your support, and I'll see you guys next Wednesday on another edition of One Quilt from Start to Finish.